Today's presentation is called Unity and Diversity. We're going to talk about education essentially. It's quite different from what was initially planned, but as you guys all know, Catherine was unfortunately not able to come, and since I've been discussing with her a lot of the same topics around education, development in Africa, and integration of marginalized people, I kind of ended up taking her spot. So first of all, I'd like to start with an apology because I have to admit I'm far less interesting than Catherine. I'd like to say a quick word about who she is. She's someone who went all the way to Kenya with no money to volunteer for a local orphanage. She lived in the ghetto of Nairobi. When I say ghetto, I mean like really harsh condition, like with rats and roaches crawling on her at night, like really hard conditions. She actually even got attacked and robbed by people with guns. But she stayed there, and she kept working there, and even as she went back to Europe, she started herself a charity to keep helping these orphans. Even though she had to work on a full-time job to sustain herself, which means that actually 99% of the donations that she gets go straight to the orphans. So the name of the charity is called Jenga. It means to build in Swahili, because it's the language in Kenya over there. It covers about 100 orphans in 2 orphanages and supplies them with school and medical supplies, restores the facilities, and provides capacity building for staff. So all of this she's been doing on her own, and to me I have to admit it's very, very impressive, and I hope that one day I'll be able to do something similar. But unfortunately for now, I'm still at a very conceptual level. But still, since I do have a lot of common interests with Catherine, that's essentially why I'm here replacing her. So one of these interests that I have in common with her is Africa. First of all, most people don't realize that 70% of conflict-related casualties, and I'm not even talking about malaria, AIDS, famines, and all the other calamities that happen on the continent. I'm talking about 70% of conflict-related casualties in the world since the end of World War II took place in Africa. Africa only has 15% of world population, but 70%, 70, of conflict-related casualties. The Second Congo War alone was responsible for 5 million deaths. That's about 25 Syria. 25 times the calamities that are happening in Syria. And it's just as recent, it was going on at the same time as 9/11. Everybody knows about the 3,000 people who died in 9/11, but how many of us know about the 5 million who were dying in the Congo at around the same time? But of course, there was a geopolitical purpose to the coverage of 9/11, whereas for the Congo, it was actually better to remain silent. Because Western powers have been heavily involved in that conflict. And actually, every single one of us has been financing this conflict. And I'm not talking about taxes, I'm talking about cell phones and computers. Because most of the mineral raw materials that we need to make this modern technology come from that conflict region. We're sponsoring those conflicts. And as a result, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is by far one of the richest countries in the world in terms of natural resources, is the very last in terms of AGI. That is the Human Development Index of the United Nations. A study that was published in the American Journal of Public Health in 2011 estimated that in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, a woman gets raped every minute. Rape has been used as a weapon of war, even like purposefully, raping women by men who have AIDS, to contaminate also the population that you want to target. And it's just like society lives off violence the way it is, and we are financing all these things, all the atrocities. I'm not talking about the mutilations and all the horrors that are happening because of these conflicts that we finance. Child soldiers is another major issue. It's been better known to the public thanks to movies like Blood Diamond, for example, much more so than the news or media. And when we see pictures like this, the first thing we think is that these kids ought to be going to school instead of learning to kill for the benefit of warlords and technology companies. And yeah, so that's really why Africa and education, all those themes have always been very, very important to me because I feel they're really undervalued. But at the same time, I have to admit that something is really, really bothering me with the education system in general, in any country, in any place. I mean, if you think about it, the Western politicians and businessmen who finance those conflicts, usually they have gone to the best universities in the world, right? They were taught to make money, to fight, quote-unquote, evil in some places and to sponsor it in others, and it's always in accordance with their interest and with the culture that school is putting in their heads, right? But it doesn't necessarily make them better people. So if you really look at it objectively, the school system is really not that much more than a formatting tool to maintain society's status quo. It is useful in the sense that it enables children to integrate better into society, but it also limits human potential dramatically. And it is responsible for a lot of tension between human groups because a system of education will tell you that this group is better than this one, and another system is telling you the other way around, and then that creates tensions. So that's kind of the point I would like to make here. I'd like to put into question some of the general assumptions that we hear at school to kind of like get a different perspective and see if there's not a better way to go about it, at least for people who are outside of the system anyway, right? So the first assumption that I would like to put into question is the following. There is more equality in modern society. So we're told essentially that before the revolutions of the 18th and 19th century, all the power was held by a tiny elite within the nobility and the church. But because average people were fed up with such inequality, they revolted to impose a better system called democracy. Great. Now, here's the income distribution that 92% of Americans would choose as ideal. You see the wealthiest making several times as much as the poorest on the graph, which makes sense for a capitalist society, right? Now, they feel that the distribution is much more unequal than they wish, and it's represented here. But here's the reality. The poor are literally invisible, and the top 3% do not fit on the graph. The top 1% here takes up all this wealth on the right here. And if you look at this graph above on the left, you realize that within the 1%, it is actually the 1% of the 1% that keeps concentrating more and more of the wealth in their hands. They pretty much control the economy, which is why you can see a sharp increase in their wealth right around the 2008 financial crisis when everyone else was losing money. So the system today is no different than the old system. A tiny elite is still controlling the entire society. The only thing that changed is the group of people in power, from the church and nobility caste to the merchant class or the capitalist, right? So adjustment number one, there is more economic efficiency and not equality in modern society. Because the new system is more economically efficient, we are all much wealthier. And that's because the ruling class understood something essential. If people believe that they are free and are working for themselves, they will be much more productive. Hence the current propaganda system of which school is an essential element. We are all equal, we're all free, blah, blah, blah. And that leads me to the second assumption. There is more freedom in modern society. So the gentleman on the picture here is Zbigniew Brzezinski. He succeeded Henry Kissinger as a national security advisor in the second half of the 1970s. He played a major role in American politics, and if you ask my opinion, he's probably one of the greatest geopolitical strategists of the 20th century. Among many other things, he played a key role in financing Islamic fundamentalism and creating that new evil that is today so useful to the global elite, in a very similar way that was done in the past with Nazism and communism. And about a half a century ago, in 1970, he wrote the following. In the technotronic society, the trend would seem to be towards exploiting the latest communications technique to manipulate emotions and control reason. Speaking of a future at most only decades away, an experimenter in intelligence control asserted, "I foresee the time when we shall have the means, and therefore inevitably the temptation, to manipulate the behavior and intellectual functioning of all people through environmental and biochemical manipulation of the brain. The technotronic era involved the gradual appearance of a more controlled society. Such a society would be dominated by an elite unrestrained by traditional values, and that's a reference, in my opinion, to the values of the church in the old system. Soon, it will be possible to assert almost continuous surveillance over every citizen and maintain up-to-date complete files containing even the most personal information about the citizen. These files will be subject to instantaneous retrieval by the authorities. And that was written in 1970, before the internet and cell phones and computers. And here's another quote from Edward Bernays, who's considered the father of public relations. This one is almost 100 years old. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. This is a logical result of the way in which our democratic society is organized. Vast numbers of human beings must cooperate in this manner if they are to live together as a smoothly functioning society. Now watch this.
You've made me the happiest man in the world. Emily, will you marry me?
How sweet. You like it, so you're putting a ring on it. But have you ever wondered why we put diamond rings on things we like at all?
Oh God, you're gonna tell us the awful truth about engagement rings, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. Hi, I'm Adam Conover.
Hey, Adam.
And you may think of the diamond engagement ring as a timeless symbol of love, but it turns out this ancient tradition was invented less than a century ago by the De Beers Diamond Corporation. Before the 1930s, nobody exchanged diamond rings when they got engaged. It wasn't a thing.
Apple, what do you say we get married?
Oh, that's a swell idea, Frank. What do you give me?
Well, I got the shiny red apple.
Sold. Oh, I love you, Frank.
But in 1938, the De Beers Diamond Cartel launched a massive ad campaign, claiming that the only way for a real man to show his love is with an expensive hunk of crystallized carbon. And we bought that shit.
Now, hold on. Looks like if I don't buy you one of these ring dealies, then I'm a tiny pecked pencil neck.
Well, it's on the side of a building, so it's gotta be true.
Well, crumbs.
In fact, every element of the traditional American engagement was designed to make more money for De Beers. How much you drop on that rock?
I don't know, like $4 grand.
Jesus, Louises, that's more than your car.
My dad said the rule was 2 months' salary.
Yeah, sorry, dude. That's not a rule. That's just an arbitrary number from an old De Beers ad campaign.
Buy her a diamond worth 1 month's salary. She'll be sure to love you eternally.
Profits are down. Better make it 2 months.
It's not like I'm throwing my money away. I mean, at least the ring is worth something.
Yeah.
Actually, diamonds are intrinsically worthless.
I refuse to believe that.
Well, maybe you believe De Beers chairman Nicky Oppenheimer, who once said, quote, "Diamonds are intrinsically worthless."
Shut up, shut up, shut up.
In fact, they're quite common. The only reason diamonds are even expensive is that De Beers has a global monopoly on diamond mining, and they artificially restrict the supply to jack the prices up. But in reality, those assholes have a fuck ton of them.
These are extremely rare. Pay no attention to that.
Which means that diamond you just blew your savings on has virtually no resale value. That's why De Beers wants you to think a diamond is forever. If you never try to sell it, you'll never figure out how badly you got fucked.
Fine, so what do we do about it?
Nothing. They've got us by the balls. A century of advertising has embedded the idea of a diamond engagement ring so deeply in our culture that even knowing all that doesn't get you out of buying an engagement ring. Seriously, give it a shot.
Okay. Emily, will you marry me? I'm not giving you a ring because the concept of an engagement ring is a scam on the part of the De Beers Corporation. But we could open a joint checking account?
Sorry, dude. I want that rock.
And that video doesn't even mention the atrocities associated with blood diamond trade in Africa, which is where our engagement rings come from. So we learn at school that the peasants in the traditional system felt so oppressed by tyranny and they revolted for more freedom, blah blah blah. But more realistically, if you look at the horrendous, and I mean horrendous, working conditions in the factories of the 19th century, you would realize that peasants were in fact far, far, far better off in the old system rather than the workers that they became in those factories. The revolutions only benefited the wealthy capitalist bourgeoisie. And they are the ones who financed those revolutions, and they are the ones who benefited from it, right? But the thing is that with time, those capitalists understood that to make more money, they needed the average man to consume more. So wages and leisure time, along with the productivity of the workers, have kept increasing. The more efficient the economy is, the more money they make. So everyone is benefiting from it, but it starts with them. But overall, I would say that it's definitely a positive consequence of the new system. So don't get me wrong, I do love modern society. I love individualism, and I love the fact that my identity is not completely determined by who my family is and by the pedigree of my birth, like it used to be the case in the old system. I love the sexual freedom we enjoy today. But I think what I love the most is the fact that I can come up to you guys here and harshly criticize the system without having to fear that I'd be thrown in jail or even executed, right? So that's amazing. In my personal opinion, I think that the modern society that we live in today is the best that humanity has ever had, by far. That's my opinion. And that's why I am extremely objective when I criticize it, because I love it, like seriously. But I just want to be objective about it, not to be, think it's paradise either, like know why, how, why are things the way they are. So, and also I need to be also very honest with myself, because I love it because I was conditioned to love it. I was born in France. I grew up there, and I went to school, and the teachers told me, oh, this is the way it is, and that's great, and all these things. So for me, it's amazing. But if I had been educated in the Middle Ages, modern society would probably look like hell to me. I mean, I personally, like, for example, like look the way morals have been evolving. I personally find it really cool that an Austrian drag queen with a beard won the Eurovision. I think it's a great, sign of openness and blah, blah. But if I ask my more conservative friends, they think it's the sign of the end of the world, right? So it really is a matter of perspective. And we always need to make the extra effort to be objective and honest with ourselves when it comes to our own environment. It's great to always ask people who have a different background their opinion, so it puts into perspective your own beliefs. So if modern society works so well, in my opinion, it is not because we have become better human beings, but simply because it is much easier to control people today than it was in the past. First of all, the capitalist system is so much more powerful and efficient than any other system that it is today completely unchallenged, completely. And the global capitalist elite is very united around, the same credo. They finance themselves crazy, quote-unquote, opposition movements that are portrayed as the only alternatives, and that's extremely smart, because people are not thinking about independent alternatives. They're put on TV for them to choose. So they have no choice, right? You're either with us or you're with the devil, like, crazy Nazi of some sort. But the devil is financed by the same people. So you're always playing the game of the elite, whatever you do. It's a win-win. And in the end, you will see that everyone will align with the system. It's just a matter of time. Now, the propaganda institution that was described by Bernays almost 100 years ago is even 1,000 times more powerful today with modern technology. And that's why, for example, I can tell everyone whatever I want, it will have zero impact on most people in terms of the way they think, because Big Brother is already taking care of that for them. And that's why we have freedom of speech. We don't have freedom of speech because, we fought for it and blah, blah, blah. Now we're good people, we have freedom. No. The only reason why we have freedom of speech is because whatever you say is not going to have an impact. The propaganda system is so strong that it will change nothing. And that token freedom of speech is then used as an argument to prove that we live in a free society. It's great, but we're not free. We are the slaves of the system, just like any other human society before us. There's no difference. We just have the illusion to be free because we're not brutally murdered for the quote-unquote independent opinions we think we have. Brutality was used in the past because it was much more difficult to control people. And it is still used today in developing countries who struggle to control their people for the exact same reason. And by the way, when modern powers are dealing with these more traditional societies, especially in Africa and the Middle East, they ruthlessly sponsor brutality. There's no question about that. And that will be the case until the point when all countries will be completely adjusted to the European Union model, where everything is controlled and there's no reason to use brutality anymore. And at that point, war will stop. We'll have a global plutocratic dictatorship under the cover of democracy, like we have in the West today, and which I really like, but that's a personal opinion. So adjustment number 2, there is less brutality, not more freedom in modern society.